For 23 gruesome hours, prisoners are kept in solitary confinement with no knowledge of where exactly they are. Then for just 1 hour every day, they're allowed into a bigger room which, if we're being honest, is still very tiny compared to how a normal prison cell is. For the hour these prisoners are allowed into the bigger cell, they still don't know where they are and are still not allowed to communicate with anyone, not even the prison guards. And the truth is, putting a human in these types of conditions led to severe mental health issues like hallucinations, paranoia, aggressiveness, and let's just say it makes the prisoners lose their mind. But before you rule these prison conditions as completely insane, I need you to first know the full story behind why this prison was built in the first place, and just how dangerous the men put into this prison are. Because whether the government says it or not, this prison is just a cleaner version of hell. The prison I'm talking about in this video is a Supermax prison for the most lethal and extremely dangerous prisoners in the United States. This prison is the final stop for criminals who have tried escaping other prisons, and criminals who are just so highly dangerous the US government can't fit them into a normal prison with other convicts. The name of the prison we're talking about in this video is called the ADX Florence Supermax prison, aka Alcatraz on the rocks. The concept of this prison didn't just come out of nowhere. It came when officials from the Bureau of Prisons found themselves dealing with a major problem. The problem was how to deal with the criminals of criminals, the ones that had proven themselves to be incorrigible, no matter the punishment, sentence, or hard labor given to them. In 1983, Federal Bureau of Prisons Director Norman Carlson proposed the creation of a new prison after two inmates, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, who were two members of the Aryan Brotherhood, stabbed two officers to death at the U.S. State Penitentiary, Marion. It showed more than ever that these guys had zero respect for human life. So, on November 30th, 1994, the ADX Florence opened its gates for the first time, and it's now the go-to prison for, really bad guys. So now we know how it was made, but how exactly does it operate? How do the inmates feed? How do they take a shower? And how do they even live? Located in a small town in Colorado known as Florence, the ADX Supermax prison covers around 38 acres of land. It first started housing inmates in 1994, and today, it's home to over 400 high-profile criminals. It houses criminals in 6 different advanced security levels. The crazy twist to this is, these 6 different levels are for grouping prisoners based on their crime niche and show of obedience. For example, there's the H Unit, for inmates labeled as members of terror groups, or those who have special administrative measures placed on them. Inmates in the H Unit are escorted to the shower just a couple times a week, while the cells are 75 square feet, meaning they're slightly smaller than a typical prison cell in the US. There's also a level known as Range 13, which is a special 4-wing housing unit for inmates who need the tightest control inside the ADX. And hey, you really have to be one crazy criminal to make it to this unit. A few known names in this level are the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, Eric Rudolph, the Atlanta Olympics bomber, the 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui, the Oklahoma City bomber Terry Nichols, the 1993 World Trade Center terrorist Ramzi Youssef, and Michael Swango, a doctor who poisoned and killed up to 60 of his patients. And as much as the ADX prison is built for the deadliest criminals, the United States still offers a kind of pardon to inmates who show some type of good behavior. These inmates are known as step-down inmates within the ADX. The inmates are allowed to secure themselves in their own cells and can associate with other inmates. The step-downs are in general levels known as Delta, Echo, Fox, and the Golf Unit. These are levels where prisoners are allowed out of their cells for only an hour, just like I said earlier. The prisoners are allowed out of their cells into a bigger cell, known as an empty swimming pool. To put into context how small this so-called bigger cell is, the inmates can only walk 10 steps from one end to the other, and 31 steps in a circle. However, it's also in this 1 hour outside time that inmates are allowed to entertain phone calls from outside the prison walls. And if they're on good behavior, they can get more outside time and a possible transfer to a lesser prison. If an inmate shows exceedingly good behavior, they can have access to a radio. And on very rare occasions, they can have a TV in their cell. The main cells are also soundproof, with a 4-inch slit for a window. Each cell features a bed, desk, and a stool, constructed almost entirely of poured concrete. The showers run on a scheduled timer, while the toilets are scheduled to shut off whenever it's clogged. The sinks are also designed without taps to prevent inmates from turning them into a weapon to harm another inmate or themselves. Then lastly, food is personally delivered to the inmates by the prison wardens to prevent any funny acts from the inmates. I'm sure at this point you'll agree with me that ADX looks and sounds pretty scary and secure. But just how secure is it? And has anyone ever actually broken out? Since it opened its doors in 1994, no one, and I mean absolutely no one, has been able to escape the ADX Supermax prison. And that's not because the inmates haven't tried, but because the prison is loaded with some of the most high-tech and next-level security measures to keep the prisoners within the walls. Some of these measures include multiple motion detectors around the building, cameras, 1,400 remote-controlled steel doors, laser beams, 12-foot-high razor wire fences, pressure pads, and attack dogs to guard the areas surrounding the prison's outlying fences. You'd have to be a real-life Michael Scofield or some type of wizard to break out of this place because it's almost impossible to do so. If prisoners as much as try anything funny, the security guards can initiate a complete lockdown of the entire premises with just the trigger of a button. And let's say, hypothetically, an inmate does escape all these measures. ADX still has heavily armed security men at the watchtowers who are trained to shoot first and ask questions later. But the truth is, the ADX wasn't actually meant for convicts to spend their full sentences. It's primarily for them to spend maybe 2 to 3 years before being transferred to a smaller prison. However, in those 2 or maybe 3 years, some prisoners still demonstrate bad behavior, and so they're forced to spend their entire sentence in this miniature version of hell. Now, statistically speaking, that number of inmates just makes up about 5% of the criminals brought into ADX. The remaining 95% are eventually transferred out to other prisons. But let's be realistic. What crime can a man commit to deserve getting sentenced to ADX Supermax prison? Well, the answer to that question can be seen from the type of inmates that serve in this prison. For one, there's the famous drug kingpin, El Chapo. El Chapo is the former leader of the Mexican Sinaloa cartel and is widely considered to be the best drug dealer of all time, after Pablo Escobar, of course. After El Chapo ran his drug trafficking business from prison and subsequently escaped prison twice, he was extradited to the US in 2019, where he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years to be served at ADX Florence. Another inmate at ADX Florence is the Nigerian bomber Umar Abdul Muttalab, aka the Underwear Bomber. Umar was the terrorist who attempted to detonate plastic explosives hidden in his underwear while on board the Northeast Airlines Flight 253, going from Amsterdam to Detroit. Umar would have killed 289 people if he wasn't caught, and for this he was given 4 life sentences plus 50 years without parole, making him another inmate at ADX Florence. And lastly, there's Ramzi Ahmed Yusuf, who was convicted in 1994 for terrorism, conspiracy, and other charges in connection with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Yusuf was also convicted in 1996 of planning Project Bajinka, a foiled plot conceived by senior Al-Qaeda member Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to bomb 12 planes in a 48-hour period. Now, Ramzi Yusuf is serving a life sentence plus 240 years at, you know where? That's right, ADX Florence. There are also a bunch of other inmates at ADX Florence, like Larry Hoover, who A-list celebrities like Kanye West have been advocating his release. But my question to you now is, do you think the conditions in ADX Florence are too extreme for any human? Or do you think the caliber of criminals sent to ADX Florence rightfully deserve these harsh conditions? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And it's not over yet, because these videos shown on your screen here also talk about the world of crime that'll leave you clenching on the edge of your seat. So, click on any of them, and I'll see you there.